Hey YouTube, I'm going to do a quick video on changing the oil in the Yamaha TTR-230. This is my break-in oil change. You drain the oil here, right by your gear shift lever. It is a 19mm socket, and you have this thimble type screen, which I'll hose out with brake cleaner. Oh, look at that. Look at the debris in there. Looks like some kind of sealant. And then you also have an oil filter, which is located here. And once the oil drains out, I will open this up and replace the oil filter. So while I'm waiting for the oil to completely drain out, grab my grease gun and grease the swing arm pivots. And clean that grease off of them. You got two of them, one on either side. So you can see it's caught some crud in there. So let's go ahead and flush this little thimble or top hat out. Okay, now I just have a clean shop towel, wiping it off to make sure it's all nice and clean. Okay, so you'll want to check that your gasket surface is nice and cleaned off, and then we can go ahead and put that cap back in there. Get in there so everything centers up, and then hand tighten. Now, I don't actually know what the torque is on here, but I'm just going to do it till it's snug, and that's good. I've worked on stuff for a really long time, for the past, really been working on stuff since the 80s, and I have a pretty good feel for what it needs to be. Okay, now we're going to do the oil filter, and what you need is a 5mm Allen wrench and an 8mm socket. Okay, let's get that Allen head screw out of there, and then we'll pop the cover. So I removed the bolts, and I have them laid out how they came out because each one is different. So make sure you note the orientation before you take everything off. The cover was a little bit stuck in there, but I was able to wiggle it out with my hands. You want to be careful, you don't want to use a screwdriver and pry in anything because this is a machined surface and you could mess stuff up. So you've got an O-ring gasket. Let's get that oil filter out of there. Come on, guy. Whoa. Oh, man. I'm glad I changed my oil. Look at the crud. Look at that. And see how fine of a mesh this filter is. So evidently you can clean it, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to put a new one on. Note how that came out, so we could put the new one back in. The new one's pleated, so a little more surface area. It's interesting. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tip the bike. I'm going to hose that out with brake clean, and then I'll put this back in. Something you also want to make sure you don't lose that little O-ring right there. So remember how I set the oil filter down? The new one goes in the same way. And there it sets. So I'm going to need both hands to clean this gasket off and set this in place. There's really no way to mess it up the way they have the bolts laid out, which is really, really nice. Because, see, it's got a port on the bottom that matches with that port. So I'm glad they made it idiot-proof. Because that'd be something you could screw up and then the oil wouldn't flow correctly and you could seize your engine. Okay, so I didn't show an issue I had with that O-ring and that cover. The O-ring was actually, it wouldn't set into the groove. It kept popping out. It was like the diameter of it was too large for the groove in the cover. So what I did is I put both the O-ring and the cover in the freezer, and I could have just put the O-ring in the freezer. I was in there for about 20 minutes, and then I took it out, and the O-ring still didn't fit seat perfectly, but it was a little better. And then I went ahead and ran the screws in and just slowly worked my way around. And it went ahead and it seated. So I figured, you know, it was in there. Should be fine. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten these down. They don't take a lot of torque. I'm sure it says what torque it is, but I don't have a shop manual, so I'm just going to snug them up. And I'm really not worried about it. That's why I recommend using a 1/4 inch drive. You don't want to use 3/8 because you could over tighten these and stretch them and snap them off. Okay, last step, let's add oil to it. And okay, so I'm adding oil. They tell you how much it takes, 1000 cm, which is 1000 milliliters. And I actually measured it out using my ratio right. If you don't have one of these, you really should get one. They're super handy. I've got one I use just for this. And then I've got another one that I use for premix. And what's super cool is they come with a lid, and I stick that funnel right inside here when I'm done, and it's always nice and clean. You don't have dust or dead bugs falling into it. Nice system. Now you could just go dump a quart in, which is 946 milliliters, and then eyeball another 50. But I'm going to do it the perfect way. So I'm putting in the next 500 milliliters of oil. And as far as oil goes, use whatever you like, whatever makes you happy. I'm using Napa 1040 weight oil. For oil snobs out there, it's developed by Valvoline. You know, I've been using it forever. I remember my one buddy, it was like 30 years ago. I can't believe you're using garbage Napa oil. And it's like I had valve cover gaskets start leaking on my 85 Chevy, and I pulled them off, and guess what? My engine was totally clean. All the rocker arms, everything was super clean, and I just was running Napa oil in that since it was brand new, you know. And I'm like, well, I just changed your oil. You know, change oil in truck every 3,000 miles, and lo and behold, everything was clean. So I haven't any trouble with it. It says use 1040, so that's what I use. Use whatever you want. All right, guys. So we are done. I'll button this up, and I really like that it has a sight glass. Let's just take a cursory look, and look at that. There you go. Oh, one last thing I like to do is I'll just actually write on the engine with the Sharpie my date and what my hour meter says. I put an aftermarket one on. That way I can just quickly check and know the last time I changed the oil rather than have it written in a book, which you don't tend to look at. Gosh, what is this stuff? Huh, some kind of something soft. It's like fiber. And then you got your little bits of metal. I'm not reusing this oil filter, that's for sure. Yuck. Change your oil, everyone. Thanks for watching.